In this video, we'll go over the best light attribute fusion monsters that have dragon in their name but are not dragon types, which surprisingly is a category that has more than 10 cards in it. There are a lot of dragons in this game which are not dragons. And at number 10, we have Armed Dragon Catapult Cannon. This is a fusion monster which requires XYZ-Dragon Catapult Cannon and Armed Dragon level 7 as its two fusion requirements, where you need to have both of those cards on your field and then contact fusion in order to bring this card out. And it also specifically mentions that you need to have special summon both of those cards during the duel, in order to bypass any fusion tag shenanigans. Although, even though this card is incredibly difficult to bring out, I'm pretty sure it even took a high spot on my video about the hardest boss monsters to bring out. If you do manage to bring it out, it has a pretty good payoff, as the card has an effect where once per turn during your opponent's turn, you can banish a card from your deck or extra deck in order to banish all of your opponent's cards on the field and in their graveyard. And it also has a passive effect, where cards cannot activate their effects if there is another copy of that card banished. So unless your opponent is playing a Highlander deck and has no shared copies of cards you control, there's a good chance you'll be able to just softly stop your opponent from using a whole bunch of card effects, as basic good deck building involves using 3 copies of all of your main combo pieces. So the card has the potential to win you the game on its own, which it really needs to have based on its summoning requirements. And I'm kinda convinced this card was created as a joke because it's a little bit too difficult to bring out. But it's more likely just an anime reference. And at number 9, we have XYZ-Dragon Cannon. Of the 3 machine monsters used for this card's summon, one of them is based on a dragon. And I guess that was enough to put dragon in the boss monster's name as well, which definitely allows it to make this list. Now, this card wasn't super good when it first came out, because even though it had the unique contact fusion thing with banishing, it was a little bit too hard to bring out and didn't have any protection, but had an okay effect on the field, where you could discard a card in order to destroy one card your opponent controls, which was not once per turn. So if you just had a full hand of cards, you can get rid of every card in your opponent's side of the field, which isn't that great honestly for how hard the card is to bring out. There's another card in the game called Snipe Hunter, which occasionally saw competitive play over the years, who has a similar effect, except it only has a 2/3 chance of destroying a card in the exact same way. However, the difference between Snipe Hunter and XYZ-Dragon Cannon is that Snipe Hunter is way easier to bring out, and you don't have to build your deck around trying to bring out Snipe Hunter. So if you do have a deck which allows you to discard cards from the hand at a great pace, like the old Dragon Rulers of 2013, you're definitely better off playing Snipe Hunter than XYZ-Dragon Cannon in order to ditch all the cards in your hand to try and destroy your opponent's field. However, it's at least much more useful than number 10, and it is one of the few light fusion non-dragon monsters with dragon in its name, so it kind of has to make the list. And at number 8, we have Cyber-Dragon. This is a 3-headed Cyber Dragon monster, which is a machine fusion based on an archetype about machine monsters who look like dragons. And it actually saw competitive play in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it was the highest attack monster that could inflict piercing damage, and could be cheated out of the extra deck. Although it was surprisingly brought out with Power Bond too, just with normal fusion summoning, since Power Bond allows you to double the attack of the machine type monster that it's brought out, at the cost of taking the original attack of the monster as effect damage during the end phase. So with Power Bond, Cyber-Dragon would have 8,000 attack, and since it did piercing damage, that could swing the game in your favor with a single attack, and could win you the game on its own if you had attacked a 0 defense monster. Although nowadays it's not really cheated out of the extra deck anymore, and it wasn't even the best Cyber Dragon fusion monster to cheat out of the extra deck when it first came out. But even then, it still saw competitive play occasionally because it needs to be in the deck in order to play Malefic Cyber-Dragon, which was another card that saw some niche competitive play in the day. And at number 7, we have Cyber Twin Dragon, one of the 2 original Cyber Dragon fusion monsters. Cyber Twin Dragon was surprisingly the better of the 2 to cheat out in order to bring out with Power Bond. They were both good, don't get me wrong, it's just since Cyber Twin Dragon was of a lower level at 8, it was the premier target for the spell card Metamorphosis, which allowed you to tribute a monster in order to cheat out a fusion monster from your extra deck that had the exact same level. And there were a lot of easy to bring out level 8 monsters that were perfect targets for Metamorphosis in order to turn into Cyber Twin Dragon, which could attack twice. The ability to attack twice is so good that Konami is kind of afraid to put it on cards without some kind of cost. And a good indicator of how great this effect actually can be is seen with XYZ-Dragon, one of the most played Link monsters in the game, mainly because of its ability to attack twice under very easy restrictions. And that card only has 200 more attack. Also, if you brought it out with Power Bond, it had the potential to do more damage than a Power Bonded Cyber Dragon, as it would have the ability to deal 11,200 damage, 3,200 more damage than a double damage Cyber Dragon. And at number 6, we have XYZ-Dragon Cannon. This is another combination of boss monsters similar to XYZ-Dragon Catapult Cannon and ARM Dragon Catapult Cannon, except this one is a little bit easier to bring out, while also having a great payoff for bringing it out. Now, this one can only be special summoned by banishing XYZ-Dragon Cannon and ABC-Dragon Buster on your side of the field, who have their original names, which again is another way to bypass Fusion Tag and not allow you to cheat it out, and cannot be special summoned by other ways, so no Fusion Summon spell cards. Then this card has two effects. One of them is that if your opponent activates a card effect, you can discard one card to negate and destroy that card. And this effect is not once per turn, so as long as you have the cards in your hand, you can negate and destroy as many cards as you want from your opponent. Sort of like Herald of Perfection, only with any cards instead of just fairies in your hand. And that's actually really good. Dragoon of Red Eyes is kind of broken because it's able to do that a single time per turn. Although that card has a whole bunch of other good things and is 100 times easier to bring out. Its other effect is a quick effect that allows you to banish this card in order to special summon the two fusion materials for this card from your banish zone. So its effects seem to be modeled after ABC Dragon Buster more than XYZ-Dragon Cannon, with its ability to tag out for its fusion materials on a Spell Speed 2 effect. Although neither of these two cards can negate, so that was probably given to this card because they wanted to make it a really good boss monster. And they finally allowed it to go to high attack point values, as this one has 4,000 attack and defense, 1,000 more than XYZ-Dragon Catapult Cannon, which was another big combination of a whole bunch of fusion monsters, including XYZ-Dragon Cannon. And the only thing that makes this card a little bit easier to bring out than some of the others is basically because ABC Dragon Buster is so easy to bring out itself. And the same deck which brings that card out can also bring out XYZ-Dragon Cannon with little difficulty. Although it does mess with the consistency of the deck, so you don't really see ABC decks running this card, but you wouldn't have to modify a regular ABC deck too much in order to bring this one out. And at number 5, we have Cyber Eternity Dragon. This is one of the more modern Cyber Dragon fusion monsters, and it has the materials where it just requires one Cyber Dragon monster plus 2 machine monsters, and saw occasional playing Cyber Dragon decks as a super poly target, especially when Orcus were meta, since it could steal 2 of their machine monsters for this card summon. And while on the field, as long as you have a machine fusion monster in your graveyard, this card cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects, which is pretty good protection since it has 4,000 defense. Although its 2,800 attack is much lower for the 3 materials required to bring it out, but it does have nice protection. Also, this card has a floating effect and a graveyard effect, where, if this card would be destroyed by your opponent, you can special summon a Cyber Dragon monster from your hand deck or graveyard. And while it's in the graveyard, you can banish this card in order to make it so that all of your fusion monsters cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects this turn. Now honestly, the best Cyber Dragon fusion monsters are the dark attribute ones, but those fall out of the constraints for this list. Out of all of the light Cyber Dragon monsters, Cyber Eternity Dragon kind of sees more play than the other two, which definitely puts it at a higher spot than pretty much everything I've talked about so far. And at number 4, we have Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. This is actually a warrior type fusion monster with dragon in its name and also happens to be light attribute, which definitely makes it stand out from the rest of the cards on this list. Now, this card kind of specializes in attacking dragons, as its effect on the field is a passive lockdown on your opponent's dragons, where it changes all of your opponent's dragon type monsters to defense position, it negates their effects, and this card gains 1,000 attack and defense for each of your opponent's dragon type monsters and in their graveyard. Now, if you were trying to build an anti-type card, this is definitely the way to go about it, because this is actually pretty good. Really, the limitations to this card is that it can't attack directly, but it does deal piercing battle damage, so that doesn't really matter very much. And this card is actually pretty easy to bring out. The Buster Blader archetype has a card called Destruction Sword Memories, which allows you to fusion summon this card from the graveyard using materials from the graveyard. So if you just use a Foolish Burial Goods to send Destruction Sword Memories to the graveyard, and then had the other materials in your graveyard already, you could use nothing but materials from your graveyard in order to bring this card out. And their archetype even has a Link monster which allows you to send it to the graveyard even easier. Their archetype has a whole bunch of Dragon-type monsters which support the rest of the Buster Bladers, and they even have a Synchro monster which changes all of your opponent's monsters to Dragon-type, so you don't need to rely on DNA Surgery to lock down your opponent. This card occasionally sees competitive play because its lockdown effect is so good, and its deck can bring it out very easily, and it's kinda just one more piece of good support away from being more than just a niche competitive deck. And at number 3, we have Panzer Dragon, a tank dragon which isn't a dragon type like all the other cards on this list. This card is on this list because it was one of the best instant fusion targets before Thousand Eyes Restrict was unbanned, as what it does is it's a level 5 fusion monster who doesn't have limitations on its fusion summon, so it can be cheated out of the extra deck, and if this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you get to destroy one card on the field. And since instant fusion automatically destroys the card during the end phase, that basically meant if you didn't use Panzer Dragon for anything, you could at least destroy something when it left the field. And of course, it also saw play for its body, since other decks and Cyber Dragons love level 5 machine-light monsters. And the only reason it's so high on this list compared to all the other lovely light attribute fusion monsters that have dragon in their name but are not dragon type is because of this light attribute fusion monster that has dragon in its name but is not dragon type happened to see a lot more competitive play in the past, even if it's not really played anymore today. Although, to be fair, a handful of the other cards also saw competitive play, just not as much as Panzer Dragon, or the top 2 spots on this list. And at number 2, we have Thunder Dragon Titan, the second card on this list which is not part of the ABC, XYZ, or Cyber End Dragon archetype, and in fact is the first Thunder type monster on this list. Although coincidentally, it is still a light attribute fusion monster with dragon in its name that is not dragon type, as it belongs to the Thunder Dragon archetype, which is an archetype all about light and dark dragons that are actually thunder. Now, Thunder Dragon Titan saw a lot of competitive play in the past and still even sees niche competitive play to this day, as it's basically the boss monster of the Thunder Dragon archetype after Thunder Dragon Colossus got banned. This card has an effect where, if you activate a Thunder monster effect in your hand, you can destroy one card on the field. This effect does not target and is not once per turn, so it's actually pretty good for disrupting plays during your opponent's turn, or to destroy your opponent's field, as Thunder Dragons are all about activating their effects in the hand. Although since it is a when effect, it can be chain blocked, so it's possible for your opponent to prevent the effect from happening. It also has another effect, where if this card would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish 2 cards from your graveyard instead. And a lot of Thunder Dragon monsters gain effects from being banished, so it's actually a benefit. The card does require 3 Thunder Dragon monsters as materials, but the Thunder Dragons have one of the best fusion spell cards in the game, Thunder Dragon Fusion, which allows you to use materials from your graveyard or banish zone, and even has a graveyard effect to add a Thunder Dragon monster from your deck to your hand, which is kind of ridiculously good. And on top of that, Thunder Dragon Titan has an alternative summoning condition, where you can just banish a Thunder Fusion monster you control and 1 Thunder card from your hand. And at 3200 attack, it can attack over basically any boss monster that doesn't specifically have very high attack power values. This is an excellent light attribute fusion monster with dragon in its name, with only 1 card that might be a little better than it, since the Master Rule revisions anyway. And at number 1, we have ABC Dragon Buster, a card that has been mentioned a handful of times already in this video since there's only 3 archetypes represented in this video, since the constraints for this list are kind of limited in case you hadn't noticed. Now, this is a fusion monster who has the best alternative fusion requirements out of all of them, as it has a built-in Miracle Fusion effect, where you can bring it out by banishing its fusion materials from your field or graveyard, which is kind of ridiculously good because Miracle Fusion itself was hailed as one of the best fusion spell cards for a long time, before it kinda got power crept. So, the archetype not even requiring it is a little bit broken. However, it doesn't stop there. It also has 2 good effects on the field. Both of them are quick effects. Once per turn, you can just discard a card in order to banish 1 card on the field. and the other one allows you to tribute the card in order to basically special summon its 3 materials from your banish zone. And the 3 materials for this card all work very well with each other in searching each other out and gaining advantage before bringing out their boss monster. So it's kind of super easy to bring this card out, while also being really good on the field, which is why this card is currently limited to 1, because you'd be able to cycle through other ABC Dragon Busters very easily if you could play multiple copies, without the link restrictions of original Master Rule 4, especially with all the brand new link support that makes it even better. And that concludes the video on the best light attribute fusion monsters that have dragon in their name, but are not dragon types. Now, I know this might seem like a random topic to pick, and it was suggested to me by another Yu-Gi-Oh YouTuber who goes by Farfa, but I think it's important to do silly top 10s every now and then so that I don't take myself too seriously. So, if you have any other ridiculous ideas that you'd like to see in future videos, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And also, did you know I started a new Dungeons & Dragons top 10 channel in the same vein as I do my Yu-Gi-Oh stuff? If you have a passing interest in that, maybe check it out as it'll be linked in the video description and at the end of the video right now.